now hand over to Mishkin, who is going to be the facilitator for this session. Hand over to you, Mishkin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was a fantastic introduction. My name is Mishkin Santa. I'm your facilitator for today. I'm a principal of the Wolf Group, which is a member firm of the Nexia network. And if we can go to the next slide, as Andrea indicated, this is, I think we've all seen each other in person at some conferences last year, but this is our first foray into doing a joint virtual webinar together. So as a reminder, Nexia and AGN are part of an alliance that was formed in March of 2024. We now have an expanded collaboration of 400 plus firms that can collaborate, share resources, and come together to fully serve our clients pretty much anywhere in the world. So that's super exciting. And so that's kind of the general overlay for the audience that we're presenting to today. If we can go to the next slide. So today's presentation is a very important presentation. We're talking about International Women's Day, which is what we're celebrating. But in specific, we're looking to understand the importance of accelerating gender equality and change in gender equality. And as you can see by the slide here, some of the statistics that are kind of overlaying our questions today and the thoughts that we'll be providing. So for example, the WEF has indicated that full gender parity will take about 134 years to achieve, which is completely unacceptable, obviously. There are over, close to 50% of females in the accounting profession, but yet they only command about 20% of the senior roles, and they only make up about 24% of the partnership or the principals that lead the firm. So there obviously has to be some changes that occur in those areas. And then last but not least, the gender pay gap is continuing to be an issue. And that's not only in the accounting profession, we see that in a lot of other industries. And considering what are the ways that can be dealt with and overcome so that there is kind of equal pay amongst the genders are going to be the topics that we're going to be looking into today. And so with that, if we can go to our next slide. So I've already introduced myself. I've asked each of our panelists today, and we've got some great folks in the panel for everybody, but I've asked them to give a 30-second elevator speech to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Kim. Kim, do you want to give us just a quick background about who you are?
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I am speaking to you from Colorado in the United States, and I'm the Chief People Officer of CohnReznick. Prior to this role, I was working at Deloitte Global, leading all of the workforce solutions and strategies across the globe in 45 different countries. So the topic of women in this profession and women leadership in this profession is close and dear to my heart, as well as my operational strategy. And as a leader, I'm always looking for ways to align the business strategies with the people strategies, in which these topics that we're going to discuss today become quite significant to our future success. So thrilled to be here and look forward to for the rest of the call.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Cheryl.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Tallarico. I'm the Director of Marketing for Sisterson & Company, which is in Pittsburgh, PA. We are an AGN member. We have about 108 employees. I've been with the firm for about 18 years. In addition to my traditional marketing role, I do get involved a lot in staff development, networking, other soft skills training. We have 14 partners, and I'm proud to say that as of January 1st of this year, we have 7 females and 7 males. So we have really come a long way since the firm was founded in 1926 and since our women's initiative began in 2010. Glad to be here.
All right, and Felix.
Hi, everyone. I'm Felix Espiritu. I'm a CEO of Fintax Consulting, that is member of AGN. We are a firm of consultants from Dominican Republic that specialize in compliance, tax compliance, accounting, and transfer pricing. Currently, I'm the president of the IFA, International Fiscal Association in the DR, and today we come here to have fun.
Great. Thank you, Felix. And just a quick background about the Wolf Group. So the Wolf Group is located, my firm is located in Fairfax, Virginia. We have 35 full-time employees, 32 women, 3 males, so I'm one of 3. We're very diverse. We have people from Sri Lanka, Brazil, China, Vietnam, Madagascar, Syria, Ukraine, Siberia, and Albania. We speak a lot of different languages, and the primary service that we provide is cross-border international taxation for individuals, foreign trusts, controlled foreign corporations. So the complex stuff that goes along with the U.S. We can go to the next slide. Okay, we are using a software called Menti, and if you want to either take your cell phone and use the QR code on the top right-hand side of the slide so that you can get in to answer this question, or for those of you that don't feel comfortable or don't know how to use the QR code on your phone, you can also go to menti.com and then type in the code on the top middle of the screen, enter that in. We'd really appreciate your participation. If you can just maybe walk through and give us the feedback on the percentage of partners in your firm. And wow, we're off to the races already. We've got people entering in the data. That's fantastic. Okay, we're just going to let people kind of get their entries in before we go to the first question. Okay, so it looks like we've got the majority of the firms are going to be between 0 and 20% so far. But we've got some, oh, there we go, 21 to 40%. Okay, so while that's going on, let's go ahead and move. We'll come back to the slide so we can kind of see what the results are, but let's go ahead and move on to our first question. And so the first question is, what specific actions or strategies can accountancy firms implement to accelerate progress toward gender equality and ensure more equitable workplaces? And for this question, I'd like to start with Cheryl. Cheryl, if you could kick us off and maybe give us your thoughts on how you would answer this question.
Sure. Well, 2158, I'm no accountant, but I think it's 133 years from now instead of 134. So we have less time than we even thought. That's a little scary number. But if we go back 133 years, it's 1892. Women in the United States were not able to own property or vote at that time. And it wasn't until 1899 that Christine Ross became the first female accountant in our country. So in some ways, I want to look at the bright side too, how far we've come in the past 133 years, although maybe sometimes we feel like we're taking a couple steps back. So as to accelerate the parity in the industry, there are 3 things we need to do. We need to get more women into the industry, get more women to stay, and get more women to advance in the industry. So one challenge is that many people don't know much about accounting unless they have a personal connection. To change that, I think as an industry and as our individual firms, need to actively engage young people, especially young women and other underrepresented groups. And we can do this by participating in organizations like the Accounting Career Awareness Program through NABA, by developing our own programs or working with other not-for-profit organizations that that have that young adult audience, that high school audience that we could speak to, or simply inviting them to our firm. It's also a recruiting effort, but it shares the knowledge, it shares the skills that are necessary to be successful in this profession, and showcase it as a profession to be proud of. Sometimes, accountants, this is really going back, but you think about the pencil protectors, and, accountants are a whole lot more of that and very relative. When we started talking at our firm about a women's initiative, as I mentioned, it was 2010. We were really feeling the pain of losing female professionals, primarily at the supervisor level, about 5 to 7 years into their careers. We already had equal pay policies in place, and alternate work arrangements, thanks to our one female partner at that time. But we learned that in some instances, the workload didn't allow individuals to take advantage of those agreed upon schedules. We talked the talk, but we realized that we didn't always walk the walk. So it led to a bit of a culture shift at the firm, but our flexible policies now have allowed for a variety of work arrangements. And one of the benefits we've seen is we have had a number of boomerang employees return to Sisterson over the years. Lastly, to advance women, we need to actively mentor, sponsor, and support them. We need to ensure they're being heard, give them the opportunity to work on high visibility projects. Don't give them administrative tasks unless they are in an administrative role, and normalize the integration. Sometimes we call it balance, but I think integration is more appropriate of their work and life, so that career progression isn't hindered by caregiving responsibilities. And that's not only children, that can be adult parents, any type of responsibilities outside of the workplace. As a testament to the success of normalizing that integration at our firm, our current managing partner, who is the first female managing partner in our 99-year history, has worked from home periodically for over a decade as she advanced from manager to managing partner.
Awesome, Cheryl. So I think I heard there, equitable hiring, I heard pay equity, I heard mentorship and professional development. Those, I think, are all key cornerstones of strategies that can be used to, close the gender equality gap and kind of push things forward. Any comments on perhaps maybe clear promotion pathways or promotion practices that you guys are exploring internally as far as, so you get them in the door, right? That's really step one. But then I think to get them to stay, there's got to be kind of some transparency about the promotions and the path to promotion and all that.
Well, and actually that's something we've been working on, really sharing clear expectations, and sharing a career path. And honestly, sometimes it's not always path to partner. We have to make sure we're also paying attention to professionals who may be comfortable in other roles. We don't want them to leave just because they don't want to join the partner group. So yeah, trying to be very clear with those, and with our one-on-one mentoring, I think that helps those discussions. We're really focusing on making those mentor-mentee relationships a bit more solid.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. Felix, we're going to move on to you. How would you answer this question, or what insights do you want to share with us?
Well, from my role as CEO of Fentax, I'm very convinced that the shift toward gender equality began several years ago. So while projection estimates that are achieving full equality, it may take more than 100 years, but I believe there have been remarkable progress that, if properly encouraged, does not need to take that long. In the service sector, we can accelerate this progress through three key actions that we planned before. The first one, ensuring fair and transparent recruitment and selection process. Two, establishing a policy of benefits, remuneration, and compensation based on positions, not gender. And three, promoting work-life balance with the organization. I'm sure that that's going to drive us a real change, because the good intentions are not enough. We need to have a firm and sustainable decisions.
Fantastic. So I heard pay equity, I heard promotion practices, flexible workplace policies. Felix, in your firm, do you offer remote work, or is it return to office, or where do you guys stand on that?
Yeah, we've been doing a long time ago. The pandemic was the moment that we identified the critics of the relevant of these decisions, and from from this day today, the results that we have is very, very good.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Felix. All right, Kim, how would you answer the question?
I have many answers, and I will keep it brief, as I know some of this will come up in some additional questions that we're going to go through today. I'll share a little personal story. I am somebody who has definitely taken advantage of remote work and flexibility. I actually jumped off the career path to be a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years, because at that time I had very little leave coverage, and financially it made the most sense. And so I am quite passionate about people having choices, and for the career paths to be able to support those choices. So I'm quite thrilled to see that flexible work schedules, as well as the concept of hybrid, has moved into the mainstream. I do think that as we think about strategies, the pay equity is a non-negotiable, and it is something that we need to really own and focus on, and be courageous to move that forward. I find that what often holds us back in moving towards fully equitable workplaces is we're not courageous enough to ask the questions, or to really put the topics out there and have conversations about it. And so I do think it starts at all levels, and it is something that needs to be intentional all the time. And so I think one of those key things and actions, and it's a big category. We'll get a bit more specific as we move into some other questions, but really bringing forth courage to ask the questions, bring the topics to the table, really taking a look at pay equity, and really looking to see where are you losing your females in that progression. So most of our firms start off 50-50 with men and women, and we decrease to that 25% at the leadership levels, but really understanding where that's dropping off and why. Some of that can be identified, and some of it cannot, because it's full of unconscious biases, but really digging into those numbers and asking the questions is what I think can really help accelerate this progress.
So Kim, you talked a lot about pay equity and compensation transparency. Does Cone do a lot of pay audits to identify, reviewing the comp and then identifying where, gender pay gaps may exist to correct that? Is there transparent salary policies, things like that? Or is that kind of something you guys do?
Yeah, and bear with me, I'm trying to dodge the sun here in Colorado, so you get half shadow and half not. So we do an audit annually across all of our compensation to see and ensure that all of our recommendations, as well as decisions that are being made, all fit within the guidance that we've provided, as well as the measures that we have behind the scenes. So what we don't want to see is that any one person is being paid, beyond a range that is appropriate for level and role. And so we do assess that, and then that allows us to catch. So every now and then, there might be some favoritism that is showing up in somebody's recommendation, and we're able to identify that and manage that in the moment. But we do conduct both a review ahead of time going into the compensation season, so that we're making recommendations of a range, and then we do a post-event audit to see how we ended up generally. So we're pretty confident that we are where we need to be. What we don't do, though, is share those ranges publicly or put those out for other people to iterate or communicate to, right? So we're managing that, and that feeds our recommendations and our guidance, but we are not in a position right now where we have full transparency on compensation ranges to the organization.
Okay, and is there, are you going to be trending that way, or is that still something that's kind of up in the air as far as where that issue may be going towards?
You know, I think there are just very mixed opinions around how you can be transparent and what is that range of transparency? Does it need to be 100% fully transparent? Can you be transparent with ranges? We are honest about our metrics, so we can talk about, you know, those metrics, but are we really going to be putting out the details of everybody's compensation? And in the United States, there's a lot of very, very strong opinions on either side. So we don't yet have consensus, and until we get kind of consensus, we're not going to move towards that beyond some other things that we do. So we give them transparency on their individual total rewards. We're just not showing them exactly how they compare. How does your 150 compare to this person's 150?
Got it.
You know, that's not what we're doing.
Got it. All right, thank you, Kim. I appreciate you hanging in there with my follow-up questions. I'll just add for the Wolf Group, you know, one thing that I recommend is the creation of what we call ERGs, or employee resource groups. I think that those can be created for women to provide peer support, networking, advocacy. You know, if there's a specific issue, you know, like I always say, if one person's having a problem, probably 10 people are having the same problem. And sometimes people are just, you know, they don't have, as Kim said, the courage to maybe come forward and have those tough conversations. So the ERGs are a great way to, you know, kind of safety in numbers. You know, hey, we're seeing this issue, or we've identified, you know, this item that we want to discuss and resolve internally within the firm. And I think that also plays into a second thing that can kind of be done internally, which are the creation of cross-functional groups. I think that's another way to maybe approach it, where, you know, you can say, okay, these are the challenges that the genders are having, and these are the best practices that we've identified to overcome those issues. So that's kind of, I think, an approach for maybe a smaller firm or a mid-sized firm. I'm not sure super large firms if that works very well or not, but definitely something that I would advocate for. If we can go back to the previous slide, I just want to check on the results from the Menti question we had. Okay, and so it looks like we got the breakdown here. Most of the firms are going to fall between 0 to 60, with the lion's share between 21 to 40%. So definitely would love to see that bar graph shift more the other way towards the 60 to 80% there. Okay, let's move on. And if we can go, okay, so we've got another Menti question. Okay, and the question is, do you have a dedicated DE&I department, diversity, equity, inclusion department in your firm? And so no, and we don't plan to. We are planning to have it, or yes, we do. So we are having the answers come through right now. Okay, we'll let that filter through for a little bit. Let's go to the next question. Okay, so the question is, what suggestions do you have for a firm with a small budget without an HR department to accelerate change in gender equality in the workplace? And for this one, we're going to start with Kim first.
Excellent. So I will pick up on, Michigan, on what you were just talking about in terms of ERGs. ERGs are a fantastic low cost to no cost way to get people involved and to begin to elevate the conversations around gender equality. It is a great way for people to build networks and as well as collaboration across that. And it also helps in that network building, which helps create opportunities for people. One of the key things that I've learned in gender equality is the concept of mentorship versus sponsorship. So we often use the word mentors. We talk about, oh gosh, let's make sure they get a mentor, and then they'll receive some extra coaching, and maybe they can grow faster. What I have found that for gender equality, what really makes the difference is sponsorship, which is different than mentorship. In sponsorship, that person is helping you navigate that network, is speaking your name when you're not in the room, and is also giving you access to rooms that you wouldn't have had otherwise. That actually becomes really quite significant in the career journey for our women in this profession. If nobody knows your name, or if you're not in the room, you lose access. And sometimes access is attained by being on the golf course. But if you're not on the golf course, how else are you going to attain that access? And it has to happen through sponsorship. That is also no cost, low cost. You can build a sponsorship program where you're training the sponsors and you're training the sponsees in terms of what to expect and what that looks like. And I will tell you that your sponsor does not have to be female in order to be a sponsor for another female. So this really can be blended, which I would encourage, particularly if your leadership team is only 25% female, you're going to run out of females to only sponsor females. And part of the journey here is that we need the allies, and we have to work within the environment that we have. If it's a male-dominated environment, you still have plenty of allies, but that's what we need to put into place. I do think it's important to, and I talked a little bit about this, is assess your current situation. This can be very, very overwhelming, and you can end up trying to tackle a whole bunch of maybe causes and cases and not make a lot of effort, or sorry, not make as much impact as you want to make, but you have a lot of effort. And so I do think taking a moment to take a look at the data, take a look at the culture, take a look at what's happening in the levels, take a look at the dollars, take a look at the investment and the programs, take a look at what's happening with training and learning and development, and then narrow down to what would be the most impactful actions that are going to stick within your budget so that you can have measurable success. And then you can do a new assessment and then another step of measurable success. Where a lot of us get lost is trying to do everything all at once. And that becomes overwhelming and confusing. We are actually educating and leading on this journey. And if we come at people all at once, we lose that impact, as well as the partnership. This works when you have champions throughout your organization. It doesn't work when you have one person as the champion. And so how you bring other people along on that journey becomes really important.
No, that's fantastic. You definitely have to have the buy-in. And I think the old saying goes, you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all at the same time. So, definitely wholeheartedly concur with that. Felix, how would you tackle this question for a small firm?
Like him says, there is no perfect formula, but identify the necessary and the results that you want to have with this kind of implementation and a space of equality in the work is gonna I think this is the first time, the first step that we need to take. We don't need a big budget to make impact. What truly matters is commitment and a willingness to change. Some accessible strategies that communicate to all the peoples, and that any firm can create a wellness culture that respect people's time, and at this time you're gonna have the results. Making equality as a core value, delivering free resources, and creating spaces for dialogue. And for last one, ensuring processes align with the equity criteria. Like I said, the size of the company doesn't matter. What matters is the commitment that the leaders have for the changes.
Awesome. Yeah, commitment and accountability at the top is definitely important to making sure, especially in a small firm, to kind of push those policies through and get that gender equality changed. All right, let's move on to Cheryl.
I agree about the ERPs. We also have a group at our firm for our emerging leaders because they also have similar challenges and they share best practices. I did want to bring up one example that we've done in the past that was pretty successful. I'm a believer in education. Like sometimes people don't realize the challenges women are going through. And we were able to put together a panel of successful women from male-dominated industries, and they came in and spoke to our firm. And the beauty of having someone outside of the firm and even our industry was they could be very candid about the specific challenges that they had met. And it was, well, actually, it was kind of a funny panel, so that was good. But it really reinforced, I think, what our women were feeling, and it really was eye-opening for the men at our firm. And again, you don't know what you don't know. And that we were fortunate enough to use our networks and have those people come in free of charge. You talk about a low-cost thing. We gave them lunch and they shared their experiences. So if you're looking for one specific idea, I think that ties in well to why we try to, one of the reasons we're trying to work towards equity. Champions, of course, are very important. I did want to touch on a little of the HR. If a firm doesn't have an HR department, I am not an HR person. Of course, there's legalities and things you have to be careful of. But, there's something to be said for making sure we're using gender neutral language in our job descriptions. I think we're pretty good about that, but sometimes it's just a habit that we have to make sure that's that we're doing that. You've probably heard the statistic how a man will look at the criteria for a job, and if he meets maybe 50 or 60% of the criteria, he'll apply for the job. But women may feel if they don't match or have the capabilities or the experience at 100%, they may not apply for the job. So there's something to be said for, again, adding some softer language, or maybe like these skills are preferred, but not required. Things that may kind of get more women to apply. You may consider conducting blind hiring practices, covering names so you don't know if you're looking at a female's or male's resume. Involve more people in the interview process. Make sure they're not just talking to, the more experienced men at the firm. Mix that up with associates and different levels. And of course, you'll want to get the feedback from the female employees or selected female employees at the firm. I think that those become pretty important. Again, if a smaller firm may not be thinking about some of those things.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. I'll share, the Wolf Group, we are, like I said, 35 people. We're your typical small firm. We just got an HR department, I think 3 years ago. And my entire career outside of the time I spent working at the IRS before I got into private practice, I've always been in small firms. And I can tell you, it reminds me a lot of a TV show from the 80s that I grew up with called MacGyver, where you kind of had to make something out of nothing and you got into sticky situations. And there's been times where I'm not an HR person at all. That's not, and I don't even want to touch that stuff. But, when you're in a small firm, sometimes you got to take off your leadership hat or your accountant hat, and you got to put on that HR hat, and you got to roll up your sleeves, and you got to tackle these types of issues. I have two things that I want to point out. One is the Wolf Group. We're part of a group of small accounting firms in Northern Virginia that meet once a year. We kind of share data and best practices about what's going on just in our little region so that we can kind of understand trends. And we share questions like this. And it's great to kind of sit in a room and listen to what other small firms of our size, even though they don't do what we do, but kind of listen to how they're dealing with these types of issues and their best practices. And then more so, if you think about everyone that's on this call right now and the fact that we've got Nexia and AGN here, I mean, you have all of the resources around you to go out and say, how does your firm deal with this? How does your firm deal with this? We have the ability to get into groups of firms that match size and talk about this issue and say, what's your best practice? What's your best practice? And I guarantee you'll hear some creative solution that you've not even heard before. And I think maybe Cheryl said this, but you don't know what you don't know. You know, and the more that you know about this, or the more viewpoints you get on it, I think that will help kind of move the ball forward and really accelerate it, especially within a small firm. And I think that, as Kim said, is how you can do it kind of at a no cost or low cost approach. All right, let's
May I
go.
put one more comment on the
Yes, Cheryl,
hiring
go for it.
process? I just want to say, we all talk about firm culture, and we want to be very careful. Firm culture doesn't mean that you're hiring all the same people, over and over again. We have that tendency to be drawn to people like us. So it's just another thing that it's a little bit of a paradigm shift to kind of break out a little bit and make sure that you're hiring the best people for the firm, not just people who look like you.
So do you have someone on your hiring committee it's their job, if like the first 4 people agree, that's their job to be the 5th person and say, no, I disagree, and kind of being the opposite viewpoint, playing devil's advocate?
It is a committee, vote, and we do have actually a new hire at our firm was a talent director. So that person's able to, I think, be a little bit more, help that conversation along a bit if there's a difference in opinion of who to bring on.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I see that all the time. I'm actually the one they bring in to be like the disagreeing person, because I'm always like, this person matches the 2 people we just had to terminate because they didn't work out. And you once again are going back to the well and thinking it's going to work again, but it's not. And we need to have kind of a diverse piece or a different piece kind of come into the
Right.
firm to change the culture a little bit.
Mhm.
All right, let's go back to the previous Menti results, just so that we can kind of see what the tail of the tape was on that. Okay, so we have 20 said no, and we don't plan to. 8 said yes, and 1 said that they are working on it. So an interesting result pattern there. Okay, let's go to, I think we have one more Menti question. And here it is. Okay, what role does leadership play in fostering an inclusive workplace, and how can senior leaders set a precedent for gender equality? And we've given you a bunch of different options, from equal pay to transparency to flexible working. For those that answer other, I would love to see what you're thinking about in the chat when you select other, kind of exactly maybe what your thoughts are with the other there. And while people are answering that question, let's move on to our last question. Okay, and I think it's roughly similar, but I'll read it out. So what role does leadership play in fostering an inclusive workplace, and how can senior leaders set a precedent for gender equality? And for this one, we are going to start with Kim.
Well, I'm going to kind of hook on to a couple of things that I had already just alluded to a little bit. I think it's really, really important for senior leaders to own their voice and recognize how much influence they can wield with that voice. It's important that senior leaders recognize their role, and I'm going to call it the power of influence, and their voice really matters. We know that there is always unconscious bias, and so senior leaders should also check their own unconscious bias that might be coming through. There's some great readings and learnings and things that are out there, some at low cost, some at no cost. And there are also kind of higher end trainings that leaders can go through in order to check their unconscious bias. But I'm looking to senior leaders to know themselves, own their influence, and really own their voice in order to set the precedent. It's also critical for these senior leaders to be the advocates on the sponsorship side. So as we were talking about, how are they pushing the envelope, speaking names, and giving access into rooms and into key meetings? that's what really starts to shift the culture, and people will model what they see from other senior leaders and start doing very similar work. Speaking of people, giving someone a stretch opportunity so that they can maybe move into a role that nobody thought of them moving into. Those are the sorts of things that senior leaders really have the power and influence to do. And it's kind of the power for good. And the opposite is what I don't want to happen is that senior leaders are looking to the DE&I office or the ERGs to build out programs and do it for everybody. I think that our senior leaders really need to take an active leadership role in moving gender equity forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you, there are times where I'm a principal in the firm and I forget like, oh, I need to be, I need to set the tone on that. I need to speak out. I think sometimes it's having the courage to maybe say something and come out with it and take a position. And, I call it sometimes just being the adult in the room, right? Someone needs to sit there and take a position and say, this is what we're going to do, whether it's, family-friendly policies or remote work or adjusting incentives for inclusion and all that kind of stuff. I think that that's critically important. And I think that the senior leaders have to recognize that the tone starts at the top. And like you said, we're not letting the ERGs and those focus groups drive it forward. It's the leadership that has to take the first step, and then there's accountability that comes after that.
And it's okay. It's okay if they don't know. So it's okay if a senior leader doesn't know what's the right thing to say, or how can I be most helpful and supportive in this moment. But let's ask the questions. As senior leaders, let's ask the questions. Let's seek that counsel and that guidance so that we can all show up for the best.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is making sure to allocate a certain amount of your time. I have a checklist of things I try to accomplish every day. That should be allocated on there. And then I think to help with understanding what the issues are, it's making sure that you're getting the correct data. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the data, I didn't even know a lot of the data before I was asked to do this presentation. I thought around and said, hey, I need to get some data points about our firm. And I was talking to our HR department. I'm like, this is fantastic. You guys have all this stuff that I've never really even thought to ask for before. But now I know the stats, I understand it. It makes me kind of look at the issue a little bit differently. So I think that's critically important as well. All right, fantastic. Let's move on to Cheryl.
I lost my cursor.
No worries.
Yeah, accountability at the top. I think an action item there is you add leadership to the performance management or evaluation system. I mean, that's something we've done, to hold people accountable and making sure they do have it on their list. Like Michigan mentioned, every day to, focus on that. Transparency is certainly important, and to be able to allow the employees to speak up and feel safe doing so. I mean, that's difficult, but that's necessary. It's necessary so that we can stand up and say something when we see things happening that shouldn't be happening. And all managers really need to figure out how to create that culture of transparency. Sorry, I was going back up. Making sure that you're paying attention to what work people are doing kind of goes back to the administrative or the projects that women may be taking on that aren't going to help them advance in their career. They tend to take on these, there's a book called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, because as women, we tend to be the ones bringing the cookies in and taking on the service projects and that sort of thing. And it's important, I think, for leadership to pay attention to what's going on there. And as Kim mentioned, access to client meetings, to any appropriate means they can be involved in, networking events. We're really focused on bringing people along now at the firm. And again, it's a culture shift. Our executive team doesn't always think to bring along the younger people, and we have to do that. Someone mentioned, I think can mention golfing. We actually have a lot of women taking up golf and a lot of senior leaders taking the younger women and men onto the golf course. But I think it all does go back to being a role model and being intentional.
And at the Wolf Group, we actually do pickleball, so that's where we're getting a lot of people kind of. That's I think more people can do that than say golf. I think there's a little bit of separation there. Okay, Felix, why don't you bring us home?
Thank you. The leadership is not a leader, a title or a position within a company. It is an active responsibility that give it to us the way to create an environment where everyone can develop with equal opportunities, right? As a leaders, so the responsibility that we have is very hard. It's our it's our duty to prioritize the well-being of peoples alongside the company's interest. At Fintax, we believe that achieving equality goes beyond writing policies, communicate. It is required to be consistent and have daily actions that demonstrate real commitment with the purpose. Today we are more than 17% of the collaborators of the employees of our company are females, and I cannot tell you that reaching the level that we have today have been easy at the time. However, it is very comforting to receive feedbacks from employees that they feel well treated with criteria for common benefits and in a space that guarantee growth in equal manner. When the leaderships truly believe in inclusion and drive it with concrete actions, the entire organization transform, and they are the real catalyst for sustainable changes.
So Felix, if I heard you correctly there, you're talking about not only talking the talk, but walking the walk and then having the accountability to, see it through. And it sounds like you guys are working on making that continuous change through those mechanisms.
Step by step, yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the Menti question that we had, just so that we can see the results of that. Okay, so we've got flexible working seems to be the top one on there, followed by equal pay. And we've talked about a lot of different topics in today's presentation. So if folks have questions, now's a good time for folks to load those up into the chat. Just to highlight a couple of the areas that we did talk about. Again, we talked about leadership commitment and equality, equitable hiring and promotion practices, pay equity and compensation transparency, flexible work policies, professional development and mentorship programs, support networks, and then obviously regular review, and as Felix just said, continuous improvement. So, those are kind of the area, just to summarize kind of, I think, what I heard there from a lot of different folks. Any questions, though, that folks may have for the panel or any individual presenter? And while we're waiting, do any of the panelists have any topics they want to throw out just to kick around? Any further questions that may have percolated up through the discussion?
Michigan, this is Kim Kilkenny. I think that the one thing I just wanted to acknowledge, which we hadn't really specified, is that we have a ton of people here from a variety of different countries. And so there are unique employment laws in each of those countries. So whereas I'm speaking generally from a United States perspective and things that I have to deal with in my current environment, in my prior role, I had to pay attention to employment laws in nearly 45 countries. And those are they are unique, they are different. So for each one of you, as you are looking at gender equity, there are some employment laws that exist that are very, very helpful in some countries. And then there are in some others where it's a bit more challenging. So definitely for each one of you, you've got kind of a different landscape within what you are working, what you're working with. And in some of your countries, you're much better off in terms of advanced in some of the leave situations and flexible working and gender equality for women. So I just wanted to kind of caveat that a lot of what I was bringing was related to my current role, which is primarily focused within the United States, though we do have professionals in India and in Manila. But for everybody here, just take this within the context with for your current firm.
Absolutely. And I'll add on to that. That's been my experience, that there can also be a disparity in the terms that are being used. You know, the term that I may use versus the term someone uses in a different country may mean two different things. And so I typically put on my attorney hat, and I like to ask the question a couple different ways. I also do this in my tax practice as well, because sometimes I'll say, do you have this or do you have that? But then if I ask it a different way, I'll get a different answer. So I'd also encourage people to, you know, maybe when you're talking about these topics, kind of define the terms that you're using so that everyone is operating from the same starting point. Otherwise, there could be a misconception. I'm speaking about X and you're speaking about Y, but we thought we were thinking and talking about the same thing. So I think that's really important too. I'm not seeing any questions, which means I believe that, oh, wait, here we go. Nope, someone described other. Okay, so I asked people to describe other in the Menti question, and this person said, ensuring policies are built into the business and enacted to support women around maternity leave, return, menopause, etc. I would suggest it needs to be integral and not down to individuals. So maybe developing a more wide-ranging policy that applies uniformly across the board. Great point there. And that was from the UK. All right. As I was just about to say, I sounds like we've done our job today. We've covered all the bases. No one's really got any follow-up questions for us. We do appreciate everyone coming together here today. And I think Alistair also highlighted that there's an upcoming webinar in April that everyone should attend if they want to learn more. It's going to go more into inclusive culture and things like that. So please be aware that that's coming forth soon.